right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Literacy Forum, connecting Chinese dual language teachers with bilingual resources. Today, we have a lineup of amazing panelists here representing some of the best publishers in the industry. So can't wait to introduce you to them. But before all that, a little bit of a PSA. This Literacy Forum is brought to you by Book and Author. Literacy Forum is a thought leadership series designed for educators, librarians, and PTO leaders, featuring in-depth discussions on the latest trends and challenges in education. Each of these sessions bring together a team of experts to help share insights on topics like equitable access to reading materials, to innovative teaching methods, empowering you with practical strategies to enhance your literacy engagement. To learn more about literacy forums and sign up for our next sessions, please visit bookandauthor.com/events. Also stay tuned and stay on our session to learn how you can win $25 gift cards on Book and Author. Starbucks gift card on Book and Author. All right, so today's goals, by sticking with us today, spending your Friday evenings with us, we hope you can have the chance to discuss the importance of bilingual educations with us and also learn ways to leverage resources in your classrooms and ultimately fostering the language and cultural development with your students. We are open for questions if you want to drop those into the chat and we'll go through them as much as we can. All right, let's meet your panelists. We have Amy, Lacey, and Dr. Anna here with us today. And maybe, let's go through and introduce who you are to our amazing list of attendees here today.
Okay. Who do you want to go first?
Yeah, Amy, you can go ahead and go first, left to right.
Okay. So my name's Amy. Hello. I am the founder of Beach Day Press, and I wrote, I'm also an early childhood and pediatric speech language pathologist. And I wrote a set of 3 board books, bilingual board books, to work with families to kind of promote early language learning at home. Did you want me to go into the books right now or any specifics about it?
I'm sure we'll touch on those, but thank you. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. Lovely to, see that you have both of that publishing background, but also the education background. And Lacey, you are also a teacher at some point and a vice principal. So yeah, maybe you go ahead with your
Yes,
intro.
hi. So my name is Lacey. I'm one of the co-founders of Biddy Bow. Lulu and I started Biddy Bow in 2020 after being teachers for, a decade apiece. One of my teaching positions actually was within a dual immersion program. So I have lots of experience there. And then when we became moms, decided that we wanted to make some books to bring home to our own families. So at this point, we have 15 titles under our belt. We have some Asian-inspired wooden toys, and grown by the second, but super happy to be here with all of you.
Okay, thank you so much, Lacey. And Dr. Anna, go ahead.
Hello. Yes, I'm Anna. I am a clinical psychologist, which, for those who don't know, basically means I do talk therapy with people as my profession. And I guess technically, I also have taught, but I've taught in college level just as an adjunct faculty, so not in kind of classrooms with children like you guys, which is amazing. Props to you guys for handling that. Also a mom, and I just self-published our first book called I Want a Popsicle. So my goal was to combine socio-emotional development from my psychology background with the bilingual component to help kids.
Lovely. And I'm your moderator, Serena Lee. I'm the founder of Duck Duck Books, which is a multilingual social emotional learning publisher. And I'm also the co-founder of Book and Author. All right. So let's start off with our first question, just elaborating a little bit more about what you have told us so far. Why did you choose to write bilingual books? You could have wrote any books, but why bilingual? And in this case, bilingual Chinese books.
Okay, well, I'll start. My whole reasoning, well, I first thought of this idea because when I worked as a speech to language pathologist and I was working with a lot of toddlers, early language learners who grew up in bilingual homes, who had, probably been exposed to more Chinese than English, I realized there just were not a lot of resources that were catered to this population. It was mostly catered to, monolingual English speakers. And I, even when I would try to provide caregiver tips on, what you can do at home to foster these language skills, I had to have these all translated, and it was just really hard in general to bridge that gap. It was a lot of improvising. So that was when I first came up with the idea. And then when I became a parent myself and wanted to read Chinese books to my own kids, I realized because I can't recognize all of the characters, and I really rely on the pinyin to be able to read those books. I had a hard time finding a lot of those books. So those two stories combined, and here I am now. So my books actually were aimed originally to help with these families of, kids with language delays to, promote language learning and also provide caregivers with tips on how to, provide an enriching language environment at home. But I thought it would also be helpful for parents like myself who have young kids, because these are just good tips in general for, everybody to, all parents can, benefit from, and all kids can benefit from. So that's where my story is. And that's why my books are here.
Yeah, no, lovely. And I remember your books have those handy guides in the back for educators and parents, which I'm sure we'll touch on a little bit. Yeah, and yeah, let's maybe try Anna.
Yeah, I think really similar to Amy. It was like out of both a professional and then a personal, noticing a lack of something there. And so for me, it was, of course, I come from the psychology world. So when I had my first kid, I really wanted to focus on helping her actually talk about emotions, something that for most of us who probably had immigrant parents, they did not do. And then I also wanted to actually attempt to teach her some Chinese. I'm not totally fluent myself, but at least, get some tones in there. And I realized really quickly, I just couldn't find much based on that. And so I was actually talking with my mom about it right as my daughter was turning 2, was like showing her the kinds of books I was reading my kid. And she was like, you should just do this yourself. And I thought, oh, yeah, I hadn't really considered that. So that's where we had the idea. And we're just at the beginning of our journey, hopefully, and trying to just add more resources to this space.
That's awesome. And Lacey, you are considered one of the pioneer in this industry. Yeah, like maybe tell us a little bit about how you started.
A 4-year-old pioneer, definitely. But it's so funny, right? So like Lulu and I, we definitely are like, I listened to Amy's story and Anna's story, and it's like so deliberate. And Lulu and I were definitely like the opposite of deliberate. Lulu at that time, when she had our kids, she had decided to stay home with them to, do all the pickups and drop-offs and, watch them and, raise them, man to man, one to one, right? And so it got to the point where she was feeling a little bit antsy from being at home. And, it's definitely a privilege to be at home, and it's a wonderful thing and it's a gift. But at the same time, there's this adult part of you that wants to be doing something, right? So, her daughter, when she reached out to me, was 5 at the time, and she had just felt like this stirring to do something. So she asked me to do this as a hobby. Spoiler alert, this is not a hobby, and it doesn't, she had told me on it was going to take no time of our lives. But anyways, it's great. But what was nice about it is that Lulu and I, when combining forces, are completely different people. She's a native speaker from Taiwan. Her family still lives there. It's important to her to have language accessible to her kids, to continue to have that connection with home, and to have a sense of pride of where they come from. For myself, I'm a 3rd-generation Chinese American. My grandparents immigrated here when they were teenagers and picked up English and Spanish super quickly because they had a restaurant in East LA. And because of that, they did not pass down language to my parents' generation, and obviously not to mine. my generation. So for me, our bilingual books are about reclaiming language and culture and traditions for my own children. So I think with Lulu and I on opposite ends of the spectrum, bilingual books just made sense. And obviously as teachers, books are something that we love and cherish and have super high expectations of what should be in them, if they're going to take up any of our shelf space at home. So it seemed like the perfect match.
Lovely. Yeah. And as a publisher, and, in this case, Anna, as a medical professional, why do you believe bilingual education is essential to student success and development? Kind of more thinking about your, Amy as an educator and pathologist, and then Anna, what do you see kind of from that level, and Lacey as a publisher?
Yeah, so I think for us, bilingual education is super important for kids because it opens up the world to them. It lets them not only communicate with others, but also be able to have a sense of pride of where they come from, and that, empowerment of like, I can do things than I thought, right? I can learn that items not only have this name in English, but they also have this name here. There's a big sense of empowerment that comes from it. Also the ability to just, feel more connected to the world around them, more, just aware of their surroundings and the people that make up, the communities around them, which has been great. And obviously, as they grow older and they, enter into high school and college and one day the workforce, it's only preparing them, astronomically, exponentially, to compete within, their peer group.
Absolutely. Yeah. Amy and Anna, anything to add to that?
Just exactly what Lacey said.
Yes, she said that really well. I agree with all of that. I will add too, it's actually, research has shown too that bilingual kids do better overall in education. Like there might be a short delay in the beginning as they're expressing language just because they're sorting through two or often some kids more in their mind. So it seems like there may be delayed, but then they not only catch up, but eventually surpass their monolingual peers. And so it's actually like literally good for their brain too.
Absolutely. And I think it's just make them adapt better as well. So yeah, definitely it's like more than just the language, is the skill set. So I know, for the 21 folks that are on the line with us, earlier, right at the beginning when we started recording, we were talking about how all four of us are mother of two kids at home. And so as mothers, now take our educator hat and professional hat off. What unique strength and benefit have you observed in your bilingual children, or maybe, challenges? I think Anna, you did mention about potentially that a little bit of that delay at the beginning, but yeah. Any thoughts on this particular question for your own kids? Yeah.
For my kids, I think the adaptability of being able, because their grandparents are all, native Chinese Mandarin speakers. And so just being able to communicate with them, being able to, see the different cultures and adapt appropriately and interact with both English and Chinese has been really wonderful to see. And so that's just a personal observation on my end.
Yeah. On my side, well, I probably, hopefully eventually it will be a strength, but my oldest just entered kindergarten this year, and I think there's a little bit of that, she was in a bilingual immersion school, then we speak to her in Mandarin and Cantonese, and she went to, daycare speaking Spanish, and so right now there's like that delay of reading in English exclusively in kindergarten that we're trying to, tackle. So yeah, but I hope educators that are on the line maybe be able to relate to some of that if you have students that are experiencing the same thing as my child right now. All right. So yeah, diving a little bit deeper to the resources that you have created, and for educators that are joining on the line may not know exactly kind of what what resources are available other than just the books, right? Specifically, because we're all publishers. So could you maybe tell us a little bit about the resources that you have created that could be leveraged by teachers in their classrooms?
I'll start. So Biddy Bell, we have picture books and we just started running picture books, but we also have board books. All of them are bilingual. We have a ton of free worksheets available on our website for download. Some of them are like crafts that match the books, but some of them are, a little bit more academic too and seasonal, which is always fun. So you can always go to download those. We also have wooden play toys, which match nicely with our books in terms of, engaging kids in some bookish play, being able to connect with, physical items while they're reading to make that connection. And a lot of libraries actually will purchase our books plus our toys and put it together as a lending library backpack that the kids take home so that they can read and play with their families and then bring it back. So there's lots of opportunities. It's funny because we actually see a lot of pictures of families that will take our books to like dim sum, or they'll take it to the market, and the kids are, looking for ingredients. They're in their hot pot book while they're shopping. And so it's encouraging the kids to try new things that maybe they haven't had, but also to see, this is where my culture is represented, and this is why it's fun, to read. And so everything kind of builds upon each other.
Yeah, lovely. All right, Amy?
So my books have actually a reading guide in the back of each book with parent and caregiver tips on how to, foster that enriching language experience at home. So the whole purpose of my books was I wrote about daily routines, and I wrote them in very simple and repetitive linguistic structures. So that the kids are exposed to everyday words over and over again. I wash my hair, I wash my face, I wash my arms. And then another one is about eating. So these are things that they do every day. So my hope is that, because these are everyday routines, that kids will just naturally pick up these words faster, because they're going to have so many opportunities every day to communicate these words. And so my hope is that, the books are relatable, but they also provide parents with, I can read about taking a bath, and then during bath time, I can use these exact words to, reinforce the language learning in their daily routine in a very natural way, without them feeling like it's being like they have to like use flashcards and, drill these words, where it's just a very natural, fun, engaging way to pick up language, everyday language. So I think these books would definitely be great for any child who's starting to learn the language. And it would be great for their parents to be able to reinforce it at home in a very easy and natural way without having to set aside a lot of time to do it.
Yeah, and educators too, because those are relatable routines as well. Anna?
Yeah. I just love what both Lacey and Amy said. It's like, not only is it helping the kids, but it's helping the person reading to them as well. I mean, as I was developing even my book, like a lot of the coping skills that I'm trying to teach you this book, I don't know how to say that in Mandarin. And so the book was also for me, like how I'm getting stuck here with my bilingual journey because I don't know these Chinese words. Yeah, but for the Mindful Peach, we started with just coloring sheets, but we have the bilingual words at the bottom, taking out themes from the first book. And we have stickers. Who doesn't love stickers? And then we're going to work on, I think, more like coping skills focused. There's also a guide in the back of the book, kind of like what Amy said, just a paragraph for parents, caregivers, teachers. The first book being focused on tantrums. So I'm sure any teacher working with young children is dealing with tantrums in their classroom.
Yeah, that's great. It's definitely very relatable to all the teachers having to deal with that. Big props to all of you educators.
Yes.
Yeah, and on the book side, we understand not everybody may be fluent, and so all of our books come with free read aloud videos where you can see our mouth move because, part of learning that language is not just from hearing, but visually seeing the visual cues, and so those are all certainly available for educators to take advantage of. All right, we do have a question from the audience. Let's just kind of touch on that a little bit. Amanda asked, Dr. Anna said bilingual kids eventually catch up. Amanda works with a lot of children from preschools, and they're often asked to do a speech evaluation. So do you have any data on, at what point do they typically catch up? Sorry to put you on a spot.
No, you're
Dr.
fine.
Anna.
To be honest, Amanda, I don't have a specific age for it, and I'm sure it varies by children and exactly how monolingual they are at the home at first. So for instance, I have friends, probably kind of like what you were describing, Serena, but like they only speak Korean to their children. Their children are only in Korean daycares, and they actually end up having to go to ESL classes in the beginning, even though, everyone in their home is fluent in English too. But considering that we live in America, that most of us are fluent in English, I wouldn't be too worried. I think, in fact, once they get to school and start speaking English with their friends, the struggle is, of course, to keep the Asian language going. But my guess would be around 5, 6 when they go to school and just start interacting more with their peers and just have more exposure to English if they came from an immersion program is when you'll start to see more of that catching up. Yeah.
I'll add to that. So when I was a kindergarten teacher in a dual immersion program. So a lot of those kids, when they came in, they were entering, it was a Spanish immersion program. They were entering, half of them were already speaking Spanish at home, and then half of them were English only. One of the common misconceptions, or I would say like one of the common fears that a lot of families have when they enter into a dual immersion program is my kid going to be behind? They're only getting, 10% of their day in English, or they're only getting 50% of their day in English. What does that mean down the line? And so I think the thing is about dual immersion programs is you're really entering them in a sign of good faith, but also it's a long-term goal. You're not just there for, that year and expecting to walk out after 180 days and be bilingual. You're there for the long haul, right? You're going to be there from the very beginning all the way through hopefully 6th grade, middle school, maybe even high school, so you can get your fluency certificate. So knowing that, I think what parents often find is there is definitely a transition period at the beginning as the kids are getting, loaded up with, language in 2 different forms. And, it does take time. And as Anna said, there are kids that catch on super, super fast. And there are kids that takes a little bit more time, right? They need to marinate a little bit more. They need a little bit more exposure. They need to, have some extra resources provided at home, whether it's, extra.
Oh, we might have lost Lacey in just a little bit. But while we wait for Lacey to come back online, we did have wonderful Gray Jan from the audience actually sharing an article with data points that prove bilingual students outperform English-speaking students at SAT scores for more than 67 points. And that's data from 2016. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing, Gray. And yeah,
YouTube videos, songs are, whether it's
Oh
no.
She's back.
oh no.
Oh.
Lacey, can you hear us?
Oh,
Oh, that's all right.
ding dong.
Well, Lacey, welcome back. We lost you in your with connection for about 30 seconds there, but yeah, totally all right. I think we can maybe keep going with the question, but thank you so much for sharing.
No problem.
Yeah, and by the way, for everyone that's listening in, feel free to drop questions and we'll for sure get to them in a little bit. And all right, so our next question, and then we'll come come on to the midpoint of our webinar. So imagine that, you are an educator, but perhaps working in an environment where there isn't, that you have to fight the uphill battle to get the resources that you need. So imagine you're trying to convince your stakeholders in education why or how does access to bilingual learning materials really help with cultural preservation and identity in classrooms. So specifically, we're looking for any tips or tricks that you can help convince maybe like stakeholders to help invest in this area and getting more support for our educators that are working with bilingual students.
Hello?
Yeah, any thoughts on that? Or maybe we can come back to this question if we
No,
need a little bit
I think
more
it's a
time.
great question. And I don't have, again, data off the top of my head, but where my mind goes is it really probably depends on every school district, like area wise. I would look into like, who is the population of that district and look at even data of like, is that changing? Like, is it, if you're doing Spanish bilingual of like, what's the Hispanic population, the Spanish speaking population? Is it growing? Is it, how is it changing? And in general, our world is becoming more global. With the internet, we're having access. We can travel so much easier now. We're getting our babies passports so they can go international. Like I think that there's so much benefit to having these resources, and being more inclusive of just the various ethnic groups, language speaking groups that we have in our schools. So I just think it's a pro overall. Is just kind of where my mind goes to, is getting some hard data, even sociological data about the schools and who they're impacting.
Yeah, lovely. Just getting that, proving that demand really of, where demographic it's already heading. Yeah. Lacey, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of how does it access? Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a positive to have any of these things. I think the thing is, though, education in the United States is primarily English only. So the majority of textbooks, extra resources, posters are all in English. Even as prevalent as Spanish is in this country, Spanish bilingual products are few and far between. So Mandarin programs or the handful, I think there's maybe 4 of them currently in the San Francisco area of Cantonese immersion programs, resources are very slim to none. They are, created mostly like by moms such as Amy and Anna and Lacey from Biddy Bow, in the middle of the night, because there's things that we need for our own homes. But traditionally speaking, there aren't big publishers in the big 5 that are running, textbooks in Chinese or Chinese bilingual. So it is definitely challenging. One of the things Lulu and I talked about recently when we went to a conference was it was a really wonderful first 5 conference. They had a setup of, all their, play equipment and, like a mock classroom basically. And one of the things that we were noting was just how monolingual it was, right? But also, identity wise, even the books did not have, characters that did not look like a certain character, right? Like all the characters look the same. All of the materials look the same. There was like a holiday section, but it was like American holidays, which is great, but also is that an opportunity for us to be deliberately choosing materials that represent not only Asian cultures, but, other cultures as well. Like as an educator, it's our jobs to be sourcing materials that speak to not only the kids in our classroom, right, but to the world around them, and so even more important to be pulling in resources from cultures that are not represented in your classroom so that when your kids go out into the world, they are equipped and familiar and excited and maybe even knowledgeable about, some of the other people they're going to meet.
Yeah, no, I love that because
Mhm.
you touch on not just about diversity, but also that inclusivity, right? Making
Mhm.
these kids not just about learning a particular language or you're having access to that material, but making them feel at home and feel seen, which is absolutely, I think that's something that every school district need to strive for. Great.
Mhm.
All right. Well, we are coming right on time to halfway point, and I will be doing a little commercial plug
Mhm.
for Book and Author. Book and Author is your one-stop shop for all things literary, connecting schools, library, and PDO leaders like yourself with authors near you, like us. Discover and book an author for your next event can be supported by cutting-edge technology. So if you represent a school, a library, or a parent-teacher organization, you can actually sign up for free at bookandauthor.com. And just for joining our literacy forum today, you can get a chance to win a $25 Starbucks gift card if you sign up for the next 2 days. Now, if you need any support at all or assistance, you can actually email membersupport@bookandauthor.com and our team will help you go through the entire process. So take advantage of that and don't miss out on this chance to win a $25 Starbucks gift card. All right. So let's go back to our normal programming and keep those questions coming. Love to see them. All right. So my next question here is, as a publisher, what advice do you have for educators on integrating bilingual books into curriculums, especially if there are limited bilingual staff that are there? So kind of what ideas do you have to help make sure that there's the students get access, even though the staff may not be fluent in Chinese, for example?
Well, that's why bilingual books are amazing, right?
Mhm.
Because not only do they have your target language, but they also have English.
Mhm.
And you
Yeah.
can use it as a resource. And many of our books now also have QR codes on the back that you can scan for audio. Serena with Duck Duck also has, those handy videos that you can
Mhm.
also, send home with kids and families for extra support. But in terms of integrating bilingual books into curriculum, I think the thing that's amazing, especially in the elementary school level, or even, if you're looking at high school or middle school as teaching language as a foreign language, like it's a first exposure, is picture books, board books are great for that, right? It's
Mhm.
vocabulary, it's predictable text, like what Amy was the bath time, and like these are the vocabulary words directly connected to that particular action. That's like, chapter one of your, Chinese textbook as a high schooler, right?
Yeah.
So using books of whatever age appropriateness as mentor text, supplemental to your lessons as a teacher, is a super simple way, right? So like, let's say we're talking about like feeling words, and that's my topic in class, and we're writing easy sentences about how I feel. I can pick up Dr. Anna's book that has ties to social emotional. It goes through different emotions throughout the different pages. I can pull out the vocabulary words from there and apply it to these magical sentences that I'm making in my classroom, right? So regardless of what you are teaching, there's always ways to connect text
Mm.
to your lessons.
Mm.
Yeah, and actually some of these attendees questions are kind of like kind of going into that. For example, yeah, like are there any way of kind of encouraging the school district to purchase toys, for example, as theirs are always talking about
Mm.
that they have limited budget. Same thing with heard that a lot of like limited budget or not sure kind of like what what available resources that they can purchase. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that and for others?
I have thoughts, but I'm wondering if Anna has different thoughts, like as from the clinical side. I feel like you would have good terminology for incorporating toys.
Yeah.
But I do have thoughts.
Well, actually, I mean, I'm sure Amy too. I feel like it is about the pitch, right? And Lacey, really, I would defer to you because you've been doing this longer and you actually were in the school system. But I think having a good pitch about ways that this really benefits kids, not just the bilingual portion, but like the language portion that Amy is talking about, or, the social emotional component, which is both popular in school, but also, we're slowly catching on to that with schools. So having a really good pitch for that and being able to really plug in with like one particular teacher or one like point of contact. If my husband was here, he would have some more thoughts about it because he's the one that's actually been talking to some schools. And I think what he has found is being able to actually have a person that an actual teacher, a superintendent, whatever it is, and being able to get them on board and then have them help you pitch is helpful, having a connecting point.
Yeah, I'm from personal experience. I've talked to a few school board members locally, and the whole part is, as Anna said, finding someone to get on board with you to try to bring it to other people in their school, in the school board, or to the teachers in the classroom. For my personal experience, the challenge is depending on the school district, they have a different, every school district learns different system, so there's the school that I talked to, they really focus on doing in the beginning, whereas some schools don't focus on that. So it really just finding the right match. But another way is book fairs is another way to try to get your book out there and to the teachers and to the parents. But, this is just something that I'm currently trying to break through to and work on. So it's a challenge. Maybe Lacey has more experience with that.
Yeah. No, lots of thoughts. So after I was a teacher, I did some out of classroom work, and then I became an assistant principal at a middle school. Here's the thing, right? Like, no one wants to deprive their teachers of the things that they really, really need, but they will kind of draw a line and push back if they think you're going to buy it and never use it, right? Like, how many things are in our classrooms, myself included, was very guilty of. Like, I had wonderful manipulatives in my classroom in the back of, that I inherited from other teachers and never knew it was there until I moved classrooms. And it was like, oh, this is wonderful. I wish I had this earlier. So I think the thing is, when you are pitching new products, right, something that's not already in your school district or school's natural catalog that they purchase from, you have to go in like guns blazing, all the information. Like, this is what I want. This is how much it costs. This is where you can purchase it from. Like, make it as easy as possible for your administrators, because one, they have no time, no matter how much they love you. But they want it to be easy, right? They want a live link that they can click on and pay with their, PO credit card. So that's one piece. But then two, to provide them that extra information, these are all the different ways I'm going to use it. I'm not just going to like sit it on my shelf and the kids are going to see it and there's the exposure. I'm going to use these to be talking about, we're going to do science with these and talk about how these dolls are different weights and we're going to measure them and weigh them. We're going to use these dolls to talk about different family members and the vocabulary that goes in there. I'm going to use these dolls to talk about dialogue and to teach them how to write stories where the dolls are talking to each other. And, we're going to learn about quotes. You write your long list of things of how these specific things that you want in your classroom are applicable to you. And it's going to be a lot harder to say no to you, especially when you like give them the cute little eyes and you tell them how wonderful they are and how hard you're working and how this will mean so much. And then if they purchase it for you, you take pictures of your kids using it and you send it to them and you say thank you. And that will build that relationship of future purchases later, right? From your admin or whoever it may be. Another thing that you can do is there are different purchasing pots for every school, right? Yes, there are, your district funds, there are your federal funds, everything is tied to something, but you also have some of you PTAs or PTOs, right? Some of you have friends of, so at my daughter's school, it's friends of the Mandarin immersion program. Like, though they have different funding restrictions, and you figure out who you want to ask. or you ask all of them. And maybe
Yeah.
some of them are like more free, like PTA has way less restrictions than your district funds, but the friends of the PTA has even less restrictions than your PTA, right? So you just go through your chain of command and don't be afraid to ask. And also don't be afraid, if you're a teacher listening, don't be afraid to ask the parents in your classroom. Like myself as a parent, if a teacher was like, I really, really want these materials and I would love these for, to use with your children that are in my class, as a parent, like, why would I not do that? Especially if I'm going to like a public school, like I'm not paying tuition like monthly for my child. Buying a $40 toy for you is nothing, right? Like you're using it with my child, it's going to make her excited about going to school and you're going to use it in a meaningful way. Great. Like, don't be afraid to ask. I think in general, teachers, like I can't tell you how much money I've spent on my classroom, just on like copies and books and, Post-its and, all the things. But
Yeah, and one thing that you touch on, which I wanted to highlight, it's like not don't be afraid to like ask for help from the power of community, right? Because we can't underestimate the power of the parent community or even the outside community or even getting support from, community organizations that are outside of the school realm. And I think when we're building Book and Author, something that we're really kind of keeping in mind, it's like offering not just a platform for you to find authors, but also a way to fundraise. And so that's actually something in the pipeline we're hoping to launch early next year, which is say, you're school and you wanted to get these resources or toys, and you don't necessarily have that immediate budget that's sitting available with your school. Due to whatever circumstances, you can run your fundraisers on Book and Author and let the author community and the parent community to help support you. So yeah, so you guys hear it first on this webinar for this amazing functionality that will be pushed out. Great. So moving on to the next question, are there any common misconceptions about bilingual education that you would like to address? I think we kind of touched on this a little bit of, maybe some kids maybe some to be having a delayed start. Are there any other common misconceptions that you would like to address? And maybe one thing I can kind of jump in here to start. It's some people may be thinking that, oh, these bilingual books and resources are expensive, which but then it does sound like from our conversation today, there's a lot of extra added value that you can take advantage of, such as the free worksheets, right? And the bilingual coloring sheets and resource guides and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay, my favorite common misconception is
Yeah.
that my child is too young to read. They can't read, so why do I need to buy books right now? Or I'll just confuse them, right? Like they're not speaking, in our home language yet, so why would I add another? Or they're going to get confused about it, right? So my husband is Nicaraguan. He only speaks to my children, or our children, I should share them. He only speaks to our children in Spanish since they were born, right? That's all he speaks to them. I only speak to them in English, and now they're going to be going to school and they're going to be speaking Mandarin there. And, I can tell you that it's the most fascinating thing to do, the one parent, one language thing at home, even after having my teaching experience, but to watch it like firsthand unveil, like the kids from, I would say like 2 years old knew which words belonged to Poppy and which words belonged to Mommy. And if I would say something in Spanish, they would get so angry at me and they'd be like, that's what Poppy says, you're not Poppy, right? Like their little brains categorize these things. So they're so resilient and just so capable. And even like looking at the books, they associate, even though they can't read it, they know this is Poppy's book. Like this is the book that Poppy reads. And he says Lobo. When you read it, you're supposed to say wolf. Like don't mix it up, right? So it's so fascinating. And I think knowing that and knowing that they'll work it out, right? If you put into it the positivity and you put into it, you don't, it's like anything. You don't tell them like, oh my gosh, you got hurt. That must hurt so bad. Or, do you need to cry? Like, you don't say that, right? You say like, you can do it. Like, this is so great. New languages. If you do it that way, they will rise to the occasion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, that sort of answered one of our anonymous attendees' question previously of like, how do you get them to like speak the language? I think like you touch on, it's all about exposure, even though in their mind it's like, oh, this is one way, you know, it has to be a certain way. But I think just having you even just speaking that in Spanish, for example, kind of like already help reinforce, you know, a little bit of that language. Yeah. And yeah, feel free, Amy and Anna, to jump in anytime if you thought of something later.
I mean, well, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just elaborating on what you said about the biggest question I have is it going to confuse the kids or is it going to cause a delay? And you know, we already answered it's definitely no. And you know, young kids, they're sponges, they absorb everything. And so I think a lot of parents do get discouraged if they don't hear their kids speaking it right away, or if they feel like, oh, it's not working. But you know, the kids, they absorb it, and as long as you provide them the quality and the quantity of the exposure of the language, you know, they will learn it. And you know, the books are, you know, going off of what Lacey said, just because they can't read the words yet, the books are like a really great opportunity for parents and their kids to not only just spend the quality time together but to expose that language as well. So just, you know, I mean, I don't know if that's anything new I'm adding, but just more of an elaboration, and that I truly believe that. So
yeah,
You touched upon something super important. I think too is that when we're language learning, the first step of language learning is always listening, right? It's listening without the speaking. And I think as an adult, we automatically assume like, oh, well, if they understand, they can speak it, they can say it. But that's not true, right? Like Anna brought up that, you know, her Chinese level is X amount, but she was struggling to find certain words. But that doesn't mean if she heard them in context with her limited vocabulary that she couldn't figure it out. So likewise, you know, you can think about it that way. You're exposing them to this language, and regardless of if they're speaking it yet, if they're listening to you and, you know, if they can act it out, right? Like you're saying, you know, the vocabulary word for head and they're touching their head, but they're not saying the word yet. That don't count. That's bilingualism. That's like the beginning stages of learning. That's the first step.
Yeah.
And like you said, Lacey, kids have to learn, they have to hear it so many times before they really learn a word. It's not like you teach it once or you teach it twice. It's just that repetitive exposure that will really build on. And so, you know, that was spot on. The language learning all starts with, you know, with their understanding and their comprehension of it before they can actually say the like string words together to make sentences and communicate with you in a conversation. So
all right. Okay, let's pivot to something that I think our attendees really care about, which is, and actually one of the attendees asked similar question, how can educators effectively partner with publishers like us to access and integrate these quality materials? And in other words, Gray asked, how are you all fostering cooperations with schools or after school programs and online Chinese language companies, for example?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think any of us are business people by trade. But at the core, what I hear from all of you, and I'm sure the educators who attend this, is just the importance of relationship, which I know is such a therapist thing to say. But like at the core, I think we all believe in the value of giving children the opportunity to be bilingual. And so if you can connect with whether the parents, the online people, you know, the person in China printing the book or printing the toy or whatever it is, and connect to that core mission, then you can collaborate to figure out ways that you can provide those resources more. So we found, for instance, it's just been like parents that have enjoyed the book and then bought multiple for their kids' daycares, for instance, just said like, I just want to buy this and give it to the daycare because I want my kid to be able to have access to it there. Kind of like what Lacey was saying. So if you can like get parents who believe in you, they're willing to spend the money. Like there's a little bit of a tangent, but a lot of child therapists can charge a lot more because people will pay for their kids. You know, they might not be willing to pay the fee for themselves, but if their child needed it, They want to give their children these opportunities. So I would really lean into parents for one, but also just really being able to connect with people about the core values of how important it is to give these opportunities to be bilingual.
Yeah. And actually, one thing I do want to kind of say, and I hope other educators that are tuning in will feel the same, is that educating a child, it really takes the effort of a village. And I think a lot of times if you feel like you're doing it alone, and it would feel very daunting, but when in fact publishers and authors like us are really willing to help. I've had a case where there's a local Seattle school system here that have reached out to us and say, hey, we love your books, but could you make big books, which are those, giant 13 by 13 or even bigger, so that they can easily take it to different activities and be able to leverage it. And, for us, it's like, yeah, if you need it, we'll make it happen. And so I think sometimes, as educators, if you're reaching out, certainly I think there is some sort of a way we'll do our best to make it happen or direct you to somebody who has that resources available. Similarly, I think a lot of educators that are looking to bring authors into their schools to do those visits, because, you don't have to do it all alone. You can bring in these people that would be able to read in Chinese, or would be able to talk about how they make their Chinese books, and, drive up that excitement for the students. And so, so on bookandauthor.com, you can find authors and publishers like us that are sitting here. Lacey, Anna, Lacey and Amy, do you have anything to add before we move on to the last few questions? We have 8 minutes left on this webinar.
I think it's just about finding your resources, right? So you don't know what you don't know. But Instagram is an amazing place right now to be able to connect directly with any of our accounts, for one. But two, you can click on our little, like, who Biddy Bow follows, or who, Anna follows, or who Amy follows, or who Duck Duck follows, to see who they're following. And spoiler alert, it's all the same, like, people in the same beach, right? Like, we all
There's a
follow
small
Chinese bilingual
community.
resources.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then you now have this bank of, these are other accounts of people, publishers, who are also doing the same thing that you might have not known about, right? Like, now here's your curated list of 40 authors who may be moms, but have the best intentions and love behind their products possible. But you can reach out to any of them at any time. And like what Serena said, we all have that little bit of crazy in us, right? Like, to do this stuff, self-publishing, publishing company, accidentally out of a hobby type of thing. Like, Serena made big giant books for people to read with their kids. Like, Lulu and I branched into Simplified and Cantonese because we were getting requests and we just can't say no to people. So you have to ask, right? Like, you have to find, you have to ask, and publishers, authors, small businesses want to help you. Like, that's what we feed off of. Like, we want our book. It would be horrible to make books and for no one to buy them or read them. That's like our biggest fear. So when you come to us and say, oh my God, I love what you're doing, I want to find ways to get this into my school or my district or whatever, we're going to help you with that. We're going to help you figure that out. So you just have to find us. And Instagram is a great place to start.
Yes.
Facebook too, but Instagram's easier to find your messages.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Court us. Woo us.
All right. So are there any other gaps that you would see in the industry that we as publishers or educators can work on together to address? I think, Lacey, you kind of brought on, of like the lack of Cantonese material, for example. And then I think Anna, myself, and Lacey, we all have Cantonese resources available. And are there anything that you can think of for this?
My old brain can't remember who said it, but I'm pretty sure it was Amy that said none of us gone into this business as business people.
That was
but
Anna.
I think, okay, that was Anna. Okay, I pinned down the wrong person. It was that pesky Anna. No, just kidding. So Anna brought up a really good point, right? Like none of us started this. Well, okay, let me back up. Most of us that create Chinese bilingual books do in the middle of the night for the benefit of our own children when we have babies like Anna's that literally just fell out of our body. And now we have all this extra time that we want to also be slinging books on the side, right? That's the majority of all of our stories. You're going to read all of our like profiles and you're going to be like, oh yeah, I had a baby and I decided I needed this. Like it comes from passion. But most of us, as Anna hinted, are not business people by trade. We often do not have our books on Amazon, right? They are not easily accessible in that you can search them and have them delivered to you with free shipping and free returns. So one of the big gaps that is really, really prevalent to probably everyone that's on this call is that unlike the big five in publishing, our books are harder to find. Serena brought up the concern that often, bilingual books are more expensive. They are more expensive because we have translation teams behind us that all have to get paid. We ship our books and we're running them in smaller quantities than Scholastic's running theirs, or HarperCollins is running theirs, or Penguin is running theirs, right? We literally are in the middle of the night emailing, districts and schools and libraries and nonprofits to build connections ourselves, right? Versus we have this big manpower team that's out doing it, right? So the gaps that are definitely happening that affect all of us, all of you and all of us as publishers, is that it's hard to find each other, right?
Yeah.
And that it really takes that deliberateness and that extra effort to bring us together. But once we're together, then we can be friends forever and it'll be super fun.
I think that's, that's definitely a good point and a good segue to kind of, talk about our normal way of when people think about buying books right now. There's no way that you can really go and say, well, if I want to support a small business, if I want to support, a bilingual educator turned publisher, like where do I find them? Because just from, looking at products or brand and whatnot on Amazon, there's no way that you would be able to do that. And for a lot of us, it's, it's not sustainable to play that game with those big five. And so, one thing with the Book and Author team, we're really trying to make it easier for educators to search for authors and publishers like us. And so whether it's through the easy search term, if you were to put in, Chinese bilingual, for example, and be more easily to be able to see us, or just simply meeting the makers of these books prior to inviting them or purchasing from them. I think we're just adding that human aspect to this business, right? And hopefully that's one of the gaps that we can help address. But of course, we're open to any suggestions from all of the educators that are going through, your normal day-to-day. And if you think about anything, definitely let us know and reach out to us. Great. All right. So lastly, any trends or innovations that you see in the publishing industry that could potentially impact bilingual education? I think one thing that, maybe a lot of us are top of mind, or it's like the usage of AI and how that, making it somewhat easier, more accessible for languages. But because AI is still emerging, right? It's like it requires a lot of learning before it gets to be 100% accurate. So one thing that I can already think of is, having AI making things more accessible, but they may not be accurate. Compared to all of us that are making these books, and we go through rounds and rounds of review and feedback and beta readers before we make those. So yeah, that's a trend that's to watch for sure. Anything else that are related to this? Oh, and looks like we're actually about time. So just want to thank everybody for spending an hour with us today. And, like I said, this will be recorded and put on bookanauthor.com/events if you want to rewatch that. And thank you so much for our panelists, Amy, Dr. Anna, and Lacey, for spending your time with us, sharing your learnings.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
All right. Bye.